Welcome to Connecting Chats. Today we're going to be talking with Mike Poyser. And he's going to be telling us all about his journey through music, physics, and community work. Enjoy! And we are live with Mr. Mike Poyser. Hello, Mike. How are you doing?
Hello. Very well, thanks. How are you, Fernando?
I'm good. So you're talking from London, are you?
From West London, yeah.
Yeah, good.
Settled into my music room this morning, ready and raring to go.
Cheers, Mike. Cheers, Mike. Good to see you.
Cheers, Fernando. I
Very
like the
good.
mug. It's a slightly snazzier mug than if I'd have known. I'd have rolled out a slightly better mug.
I know because you're famous for your research into mugs and
Yep.
coffee. We can have a little chat about that deep research afterwards as well. Good. So welcome to Connecting Chats number 5. Very happy to have you here, and let's get started then. So tell us, Mike Poyser, who are you? What's your background? Like, where are you from? Where were you born? And what do you play? Tell us all about it.
Wow, that's
Not
a
all. Save some, but
I started, born in 1981, Fernando.
okay.
I grew up in the north of England, and then moved to London when I was 18 to study at the Royal College of Music. And I studied this ridiculous thing, the tuba. And I also studied physics actually at university. I did a joint course called Physics with Studies in Musical Performance. With the idea that I was going to become a scientist when I came down to London, and I just wanted to keep practicing my tuba because I liked playing the tuba. And then through my time at the college, I kind of got better at the tuba and less good at the physics. So kind of changed my goals during my time at college, to the point where by the time I was kind of in my third year or fourth year, I was playing professionally as well as studying. So I thought, actually, how many people get this opportunity to try and carve out a career as a musician? So that's kind of what drove me into being a tuba player.
And how sorry to interrupt, but how was your before you went to university? that I'm sure there's a lot of music education building up to that. How was your first contact with music, and how did you get
Sure.
into enjoying music and physics, but also the music?
Yeah, but mainly the music, I'm
Yeah.
guessing. Basically, that's a really good question. I played piano when I was 6, hated it. I'm not very good at piano to this day.
What do you mean you play the piano? Did you have lessons?
Had lessons, yeah, had
Yeah.
private lessons when I was 6. It took me about 5 years to get to grade 1 standard, that kind of awful, mal-coordinated person that I am. But then found when I was 10 years old, I went into school one day, and someone came in from the music service and said, anyone want to play a musical instrument? And I was like, yeah, I'll give that a go. And I wanted to play the trumpet because I wanted to play Star Wars, the main theme tune to Star Wars, basically. And
That's
he
your
looked
goal, right? That was your goal.
he then looked at the size of me, because I was quite tall as a child. I'm still quite big, I guess.
Yeah.
And he's like, no, you're going to play the tuba. So I was given this, as a 10-year-old, I was given this massive instrument, kind of staggered home from school with it. And I think my poor old mum was like, what on earth are you doing with that? And then from that moment on, I was hooked, totally hooked. And growing, actually, this is a really fascinating thing, Fernando. My old school is called Wardle High School, which is it's a comprehensive school in a not particularly affluent area of near Rochdale, and but it has a unique setup in that it offers free instrument lessons to anyone that wants it, which I think is amazing, and it still does this to this day.
Wow.
And so in my year 7, for my first year at high school, there were 120 people playing brass instruments at school.
Wow.
And they don't have a school band, they have a year band. So there was a year 7 band, a year 8 band, a year 9 band, 10 band, and so on through the schools. And when I was there was about 450 people playing brass instruments at the school.
Amazing.
So it's almost like it was more normal to be a brass player than to not be a brass player.
And be a guitarist, like.
Yeah, no one played guitar, no one played flute, no one played anything. It was all about the brass instruments. And so I grew up in this very old school, traditional brass band movement, really, where you play the marches and the hymn tunes and you'd all that kind of thing. And you'd dream one day of playing with one of the really famous brass bands and things like that. So that was my window into practicing the tuba and trying to get better.
So who was that person? Who is the person who said, "You're not playing the trumpet, you're going to play the tuba"?
That was a guy called Fred Bowker. He was my first teacher, aged 10. He did 10 till 11, and then at school, when I got to high school at Wardle, the music teacher happened to be a tuba teacher. And so one of the music teachers happened to be a tuba player, and so he took me under his wing a little bit and showed me the ropes.
Amazing! You need to have an album like dedicated to this guy.
I don't think anyone wants a solo tuba album dedicated.
Amazing! But then you went from that like straight. So you never stopped playing tuba then from that moment, and you didn't go to play other instruments or anything. You just stayed with the tuba.
Yeah, just on tuba then. And in fact, during this COVID-19 crisis, this is probably the longest I've gone without playing a gig as well since I was 10 years old. Because even as 10-year-olds, we were playing gigs every term, or several concerts, and so it's been a very strange kind of moment these last few months. But yes, just playing the tuba. Kind of, I got better at the piano eventually, but not great. But then I was very much in the brass band world all the way through until I went to university. In fact, the first time I ever played in an orchestra was the Royal College of Music Symphony Orchestra. I'd never played in a school orchestra or anything like that. So it was another new learning experience when I went to college.
And did you have any kind of informal practice as well, rather than the bands and the school and like just jamming or playing jazz or traditional music or whatever? No, it was
absolutely none. It was just the brass bands. There was nothing but brass bands. It was just brass
reading. So like reading and playing arrangement.
Yeah. And without very much knowledge of harmony either. So I'd just play my part and then I'd worry and hope that everyone gets to the end at the same time that I did. And there wasn't much thought about the music, really. It was only when I went to the Royal College of Music that I started to think more about harmonic structure and how music is created, really. I mean, obviously I did my A-levels and things like that, so I knew a bit about composition and things, but it was much more just about the playing. And then gradually my eyes and my ears were opened while at the RCM, and I started doing a lot of jazz as well as classical music when I was at the RCM as well. And then basically my teacher just said, one of the first lessons I had at the college was, he just turned around and said, whatever you do, just say yes to things and then figure out how to do it. So if someone says go and play a gig at a jazz club, say yes, and then work out what tunes they're going to be playing, figure out how to play them and what your role might be, and just do your homework as you go, basically. And that's kind of treated me really well, in that I've always had an open attitude to new challenges, and that's kept me going, really. So
that's amazing that you say that, because you're the second person who says that in this connecting chats, say yes before you realize what you're going to do, and that's a great lesson, isn't it? Find your way as you walk. And cool. So how was that? So very like music training, reading, playing bands. going to the RCM to study. How did you do the transition to, not transition because you haven't left that life yet, um, but how did you get into leading workshops and doing community projects? And how was that?
Mm.
How did that
Yeah.
appear to you? And then you said yes, as I'm assuming.
Yes, exactly. And again, it was quite an organic thing, really, in that I have no training in music education and how to lead a workshop. There wasn't a course at the Royal College of Music that you could study. I know a lot of the Guildhall School has a really fantastic course, which you did. Did you do that?
I
I can't
did the
remember.
masters, yeah, the
Yeah.
leadership, yeah.
So, but there's no equivalent at the Royal College of Music, and
Not even
so,
at Guildhall now is all done.
I really,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah,
it's sad,
that's really
but it's all gone now.
yeah. But for me at the RC, while I was still at the RCM, there's a guy called Kev Hathaway who's a percussionist who's principal percussion of the Philharmonia Orchestra,
Mm.
and he had a real passion for music education. And so even though there wasn't a course, he created two groups at the Royal College of Music. One was called Prince Consort Percussion, and that was a drum group that was set up just to go into schools to run percussion workshops. And then he also created a mini orchestra called the Elastic Band, and that was one instrument of each instruments of the orchestra. And then he took that group around the country playing concerts in schools, but also running workshops in schools. And I think it was that moment, really, that those moments where I kind of watched what he did and kind of looked and saw the reactions that he was creating for these children, and actually these life-defining moments for some of these children.
Yeah.
They've heard live music face so close to their faces that they're really inspired. And actually, we've had many students come through into the RCM since that have recount their first experience of music being the Elastic Band, and I found that really, really inspiring. And so I thought, well, actually, if he's doing that, is there room for other ensembles in a similar way to do that? So I spoke to some of my friends in the bar, funny enough, as a brass player. We're in the bar and we're like, could we create something similar on a smaller scale? And so we actually created a little group called Heavy Metal, which was a few tuba players and a drummer. And we set up this group specifically to try and create that kind of experience for children, where they hear live music, but also have a full-on real integration and real interaction with us. And then dived onto the Live Music Now scheme with that group, which was fantastic. Once we got too old, we moved it over onto, we're still a part of Music in Hospitals with that group as well. But we, and so that was our first kind of tentative steps into trying to run a workshop and discussing who's going to do which bit and all that stuff. And then at the same time as that, an organisation called Create got in touch, and they had a vacancy. It was in the early days of Create being organised, and they had a workshop leader and then several assistant musicians booked on a massive project called Count the Beat. And one of their musicians was a tuba player, and he just dropped out mid-project because he wasn't well or something. I can't really remember. But they wanted to replace the tuba player, who was one of the assistant musicians, with another tuba player. So to this day, I don't know how they got my number, but they phoned up and said, do you fancy it? And I, given that I have a physics background, I love maths. I was like, yeah, music and maths project is for me. And so having had the real high energy levels of Kev Hathaway and his approach to music education, I then went into Create, and I worked with a guy called Graham Ricks, who's a much more thoughtful educator and works in a much more low, slow, deep voice. And so then I started to realize that actually it's you create your own voice, you create whatever you need to be. So working with him was fascinating, and I worked with Create on many different projects as an assistant musician for years and years and years, and worked with people like Lucy Ford as well, who's fantastic. And then I think they ran out of workshop leaders.
No,
Um,
don't come
no,
with this little chat.
I'm serious. I think this is the truth. I think there was a Count the Beat maybe 4 years later or something like that, 3 years later, and I think they just couldn't find anyone to run it, and they went through their list, and then they tried to find someone that didn't work for Create to come in, and it didn't work out.
So it was like
And yeah,
Mike.
yeah, exactly. Yeah. I mean, and somehow they decided to give me a go, basically, and say, "Could you have a go at running a workshop?" And happily, it was a music and maths thing, which I felt very
Oh,
comfortable
cool.
with. But
Yeah,
also, it was a project that I'd done before with Graham, so I
yeah,
kind of felt like I knew what I was doing. Um, yeah, so that was like the real transition from being kind of a player in an ensemble that's quite good with working with children,
yeah,
and being an assistant and being quite good with that's kind of set up to being sole in charge. It was like, oh, okay, now that's where we're going. And actually, since that point, Create hasn't booked me for anything but running the workshops, and
yeah.
so I kind of miss it a little bit. Just kind of
Well, being an assistant.
fiddling on, well, kind of misbehaving, really.
Well, on that first, on that is that Keth, you said the name of the first one you did, the Philharmonia one.
Yeah, Kev. Yeah.
Kev, yeah. So,
Yeah.
what did you guys have any other kind of? Were you just assisting as musicians, or did you have to run any kind of warm up or help with something? How was that?
Yeah, it was no. We never ran any of we never ran any of the kind of warm ups or the huge group things. But occasionally we'd be put in charge of a small group
Cool.
where we had to run
Yeah,
a little bit, and occasionally we'd have to play things and entertain them while he sorted something out. But no, it wasn't that much responsibility really.
no, yeah,
But
but just
without
just right, maybe, no, for someone
exactly
starting.
and also what it meant is I had a chance to sit back
Yeah,
and just watch. And I think that was crucial for me, having not trained in this subject. It was, why did Kevin have so much control over these children? Why were they so glued to him? And I had opportunity to sit there and think and go, actually, what he's doing there is actually, he's not being a musician. He's actually being a mime. He's using his body to kind of convey ideas without even speaking at times.
yeah,
And why is that so useful? Well, it's because children are not used to being dealt with like that, and asked to kind of and be challenged to understand things. They're used to being told by a teacher, this is what we're going to do. Now we're going to do it. Now we're going and Kevin challenged all of those ideas with the children, and that really hit a kind of a chord in my head. And I was like, actually, that's exactly how I feel as a person.
yeah,
As you know, I'm quite quite an eccentric man, and
yeah.
I kind of like challenge going in slightly wonky directions, and I think that in itself just creates an interest in it amongst children, which I think is really useful. So that was not having that much stuff to do really, other than play the tuba when I was told to play. Actually, interestingly, gave me more time to analyze and
Yeah.
understand, and I think that was really key actually. So
And I
yeah,
loved when you said like to see the kids' reaction as well. You know, it's like you could see how it's not just passive watching something. Is really that is sparkling some magic in there, isn't it? In the
yeah,
room, it's amazing. And you said you said like, oh, since then I've been working with Create and everything, and it sounds like you're just doing that one kind of job, and I know it's a very varied kind of thing. Can you give us a little idea of what kind of workshops you lead nowadays, and yeah, all the kind of differences between them, and what, because I know you do like music, but you also do music with physics, with
yeah,
maths, and with
definitely,
science
yeah.
and everything, and you do stuff for other companies as well. So can you give us a little panoramic view on Mike Poyser's activity as a workshop leader nowadays?
Yeah, as a workshop, I mean, I've worked with all kinds of groups, but I've kind of over the last few years, I've settled on several organisations and really focused on working with those. So at Create, we run workshops for, I can't remember what the official term is, or what their kind of website says, but we basically work in all corners of society where music or arts haven't really got to. So I've done a lot of work in prisons for Create. And in fact, we've done a lot of work together in prisons for Create.
Yes.
And
when we were in prison together, right? We can speak.
We were in prison together. I've still got the tattoo. I haven't got a tattoo. And so in prisons, we've worked with SEN schools, and we did an SEN school together as well, didn't we, Fernando?
We did, yeah.
Junk workshop, which was
Junk
so much fun.
Yeah.
And then we've also been doing a lot of stuff with young carers, and actually the young carers thing has gone online really successfully this summer. So we've been doing Zoom workshops for young carers all summer. But then I also work for the Royal Albert Hall. That's been a really fascinating time. Basically, the Royal Albert Hall for a while had a sponsorship deal with Samsung, and they turned around and said, we love the music element of your education program, but we'd love to bring in more science into the world, into this program, because not many people know this, but the Royal Albert Hall shouldn't have been called the Royal Albert Hall. It was actually changed last minute by Queen Victoria. It was going to be called the Central Hall for Arts and Sciences.
Wow.
And so the idea was that it was a place to show off ideas, new discoveries. So in the early days, like Einstein came and talked, discussed some of his papers. The first demonstration of electric lighting was at the Royal Albert Hall, things like that. So, but that's kind of been lost over the years. And Samsung, being a tech company, said, we're going to give you this much money, but we'd like you to put together some science and maths workshops for children as well. So that's when I was kind of contacted by the hall, and they said, Mike, you've got this background in physics as well as music. What do you think? And so we created a physics and the science of sound project, which was secondary school children coming in to run workshops with them. And in that, we kind of cover a lot of the syllabus for sound waves, but also have a bit of fun making music about science. And then we also have been doing some maths as well with primary school children, and looking at probability with them, and fractions and graphs and things like that. So those two projects we created on the back of Samsung kind of forcing us to do that. And then another happy chance kind of came about with the former chief executive of the hall turned around one day and said, do you know what, we have an aging population in our hall, but once they're not able to come to the hall, we don't do anything for them. You know, we take their money throughout their lives, and then as soon as they're a bit infirm and can't make it into the hall, we just abandon them. He's like, I'd like to change that. So then Paul Monday, who works at the hall as one of the education executives, sat me down over lunch and said, what could we do? And that was a really lovely moment, because we kind of looped back to the old live music now kind of idea of playing a lot of music. And so we created a thing called the Royal Albert Hall Songbook, where we take a little group, a little trio of players, and we present a little concert in old people's homes. But within that, there's a lot of information packed in about the Royal Albert Hall, historical facts, and basically treat it like a trip down memory lane. So we play a bit of Vera Lynn, a bit of Tom Jones, and look at the history of the hall as well. So that was a really nice thing to create as well. And then I also teach at the Royal College of Music as well. So
teach the tuba?
No, I don't actually. I teach at the senior college. I teach a thing called professional skills.
So which is it a workshop leading stuff?
Yeah, it's teaching. It's the starting blocks. It's the starting point of giving RCM students the ideas to go into music education. And
I was gonna tap into that now. how is that for you, like someone who didn't have, the formal education in terms of workshop leading, a formal training, let's say, um, kind of leading this training, but with, with young musicians that probably some have never heard about that kind of work, and,
Yeah.
they went into Royal College to be the best musician in the world, and then, your son,
Then they're presented with me, Fernando.
like yourself, of course, and then suddenly, like they are doing something completely different. How is that for you? Like, for you and for them, how do you describe that experience of training, having never trained yourself? Like, how is that? Like, I don't know.
I mean, I train them. I train them for outcomes. So I say, look, at the end of this, we're going into a school, and we're going to give these children a really positive experience. If you were, if you had a group of professional musicians come into your school, what would you want?
Mm,
And so that's their starting point, is go, actually, I wouldn't want to hear this. That sounds a bit boring. We always go back. I was like, if you were a kid, would you want to hear that?
yeah,
And so that's been a real, that kind of gives them a real insight into what we're trying to do. I also say that not everyone is kitted out or wants to work in music education, but having been a freelance tuba player for so long now, I know that almost everyone works in education to different degrees, whether it's being the tuba teacher for such and such a school, or being the someone that runs the choir on a Wednesday evening for a school or for a community. There's always education going on, as well as doing your performance work as well. So I try to get that in these students' heads, that actually the dream of turning up and becoming an international soloist is a dream that you should have, but you should also be realistic that the international soloists are still running masterclasses. Look at Nicola
yeah,
Benedetti and what she's done. That there's room for it, and if you put some thoughts and you actually try to become the best at this as well, that's showing respect to the Royal College of Music and respect to your course, because you want to create something really, really good, rather than just bumming along and doing all right at something. That's not what music college is all about, really. I think it's trying to create people that are driven and focused. And so I try to do that, really. Obviously, having done a lot of workshops, I know where, what works, what doesn't work. I also know why it doesn't work, and why it does work. And, I've read enough about music education to be able to back that up with actual knowledge as well now. So, so we kind of, I think for me, I think what's interesting for me is that I try to get in their heads as a performer, because these children, these students rather, are, these 19, 20-year-olds, they're desperate to perform. And as a performer myself, I can kind of go, look, this can actually enhance your playing, and your playing can actually enhance your work as an educator as well. They can really come together really nicely, and I think that hopefully inspires some of them to move on. And I think the other thing I say is that who are you going to play your concerts to if we don't have music education?
yeah, of course, yeah. Who's gonna be interested in music if
Yeah,
if you don't have, inspiring
and
musicians?
exactly, and it's not about with these workshops. I don't think it's about creating necessarily the next Fernando, or the next Mike, or whatever. It's about creating people that are just interested in music.
Yeah.
And if you have people that are fascinated by music, then you've got an audience, and that's what you're trying to achieve.
Yeah.
So
It's amazing. Like I like, this is all about Mike, but I was doing some training at Guildhall, and then we go around, the circle, and say like, oh, how did you get into music? Well, when was your first musical experience or something? Just to kind of the same thing you said, like, what would you like when you were a kid or something? And one of the guys once said, like, actually was a bunch of musicians came to my school and led workshops. Exactly what we were gonna do in 2 weeks time, you know. And I was like, oh man, and now you're studying music, you know, like that's how powerful it can be, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And if you make the students aware of that they cut that, because you've got to remember that a Royal College of Music student or a Guildhall School of Music student is just a school child plus 1 year or plus 2 years.
Yeah.
They're still the transition from being a learner to become a teacher is still happening. So they're not fully aware of it yet, and it's giving those ideas to them and going, this is your time to start inspiring children. You're going to get much more. You're going to get much more inspired by someone that's 20 but knows what they're doing, because they look like, you know, that could be me one day.
Yeah.
Rather than a couple of bald oldies like me and you know.
That's true. Unfortunately, that's true.
Look at these two ancient idiots.
Mike, we're getting to our moment in the connecting chat where I invite our guests to feel free. So this is our feel free moment here where you can improvise and say whatever you want to say to finish off our conversation. You can do a complaint, inspirational quote, or a comment or a gig you watched, anything you like. This is pretend I'm not here and just go for it. You have 30 seconds to think about. And
oh, right, okay.
No.
Crikey. Well, I would like to say thank you for having me, Fernando, and making me kind of trawl through my memories of all these musical experiences. I think one thing we might not have covered that you mentioned earlier was one of the things I love most about my career is this two-pronged attack of being a performer and also a workshop leader. I'm very proud. I think there's a lot of kind of not animosity but nervousness between community music leaders and kind of performers and orchestral performers, and just because there's a little bit of tension, or maybe not tension, but a lack of understanding of each other's efforts. You know, I think a lot of orchestral players kind of look at community music makers and go, I'm not sure what you're trying to achieve here, and then maybe sometimes community music makers don't appreciate how much an orchestral player trains and works to get that level of perfection as well. But I think there is room for both if you spend time and think about both, and that's something I've done over the last 15 years as a tuba player and a workshop leader. And I'm really proud to have played in lots of really great orchestras, and I recorded lots of great music with various groups. But I'm equally also really proud to run workshops for so many organisations, and but crucially, actually, hopefully, trying to make a difference to young people and to anyone that I'm working with, really, and try to create something that inspires them. I mean, I don't know whether you were on the prison project when we were running. I don't even know which prison I was in, but we did this thing, and we were writing this. We're doing this book, bedtime stories for children, and turning it into an audio book. And at the same time, Alan Sugar and The Apprentice was one of the challenges for the apprentices was to create a children's book and turn it into an audio book. And the next day, the prisoners came in and just went, they did what we did, and ours is better. And to see some hardened men kind of have that genuine passion and go, do you know what? I'm going to try and do this when I get out. I'm going to try and write some morally great stories for children to really try to keep them on the straight and narrow. And it's like, job done. That for me is the magic. So.
Oh, Mike, that's amazing. Always bringing tears to my eyes, Mike Poyser.
Usually because of my tuba playing, though.
Thank you so much, Mike. We're this is it for us now, and hopefully everyone's going to enjoy it as I did. And let's do a last cheers to kind of our non-matching mugs.
I'm so disappointed in myself. Cheers.
And don't forget to follow Crop Cup handles on Instagram as well, which is Mike.
Oh yeah.
Maybe first job, right? That's your main job. And
I was going to say I am an influencer. I'm an influencer. I think I've got over 100 fans.
Thank you so much, Mike. See you very soon, I'm sure.
Cheers, Fernando.
Keep inspiring people. See you soon. Cheers. Bye.